think we'll get started. So thank you all for joining us today. So I am Ferry Reynolds. I'm an associate professor in English language education here in the faculty, and currently I'm also serving as the master's program director and also the coordinator for the Masters of Science in Data Science program. So I'm very pleased to introduce to you today Professor Ding Chen. Okay, Professor Ding actually was my first PhD student, and she's joining us here in the faculty for a short time as a visiting scholar. This is actually her last day here. And she's from Hefei University of Technology. She now is an associate professor there, and she does research related to vocabulary acquisition, especially incidental vocabulary acquisition, extensive reading, and she's also doing some things about English for academic purposes as well. I think a little bit since her new job there. She is a great example of an excellent PhD student. So I was very fortunate that she was my first PhD student because she set the tone for all of the rest of my PhD students. So I always say this is what my students should strive to be. So please welcome her in sharing a little bit about the current research that we're doing related to our research project. It's a international collaborative research project. And she's also holding another grant from the Ministry of Education as well. So she's working on these two projects. This project is related to developing a productive collocation assessment in L2 English, and also looking at collocation competence among diverse language groups. So L1 language groups, so L1 Chinese, Swedish, maybe French or German in Belgium, and Dutch, sorry, and many other places that we're working on. Also some Chinese students studying in different places, so for example in the UK, or some coming here, and also in mainland China. So a very big project. So today she's only going to share one small part that we've already completed of this project. So let's give her a warm welcome.
First of all, thank you, Professor Reynolds, for your kind introduction. I feel very honored and happy to see, there are still a lot of audience here because this is the end of the semester, and I feel very honored that you come here on this very suffocating day. Okay, so then I will move on to talk about this talk. Before I formally start this talk, I want to give two quotes first. One is from Richard, 1976. He said that vocabulary is a building block of language. Another quote is from Wilkins, 1972. He said, without grammar, very little can be conveyed, but without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. So these two classic quotes has reminded us of the central role vocabulary has played in second language or foreign language learning and acquisition. But when talking about vocabulary learning, we're not only talking about how many words a person knows about vocabulary, but we are also trying to figure out how much one knows about a particular word, and that is depth of vocabulary. So for today's talk, I will mainly focus on one aspect of the vocabulary depth, that is collocational knowledge. And specifically speaking, I would like to present results from systematic literature review, on which we are trying to figure out and sort out the instruments, icon formats, assessment tools that assess L2 English language learners' collocational knowledge, either productive or receptive. So the aim of this literature review was actually want to shed a light on how collocation knowledge has been conceptualized and assessed. So with which we want to also further shed a light on what does it mean for researchers and also for teachers. The bigger part, or the major part of the talk will be presenting the results that the available assessment tools for second language learners and teachers But I also briefly talk about a little bit of background and also the method, how the literature review was conducted. So when you're talking about collocation, well, think of different definitions. Like there are more than one word, usually 2 or 3 words that occur together. And we probably also associated the term with other broader terms like formulaic language, expressions, sequences, and also multiple word units. And probably you will also associate that with other relevant and also equivalent terms, lexical bundles, phrases, and idioms. However, in fact, although there is an increased interest in this topic, there is no consensus on how the definition of formulaic language and also collocations has been formulated. But researchers from the different disciplines like phraseology, corpus linguistics, psycholinguistics, second language acquisition, they're trying to form up their own definitions of formulaic language and also collocations. And most of them will loosely fall into the 3 major approaches. Now we will take a look at one by one. So the first one is frequency-based approach. For this approach, it emphasizes the frequency of occurrence of word combinations in either written or spoken opera. We all know that some words may have a very low frequency of occurrence in operas, but they are more likely to be associated, and more often they are salient to native norms. But this could also be regarded as formulaic language or collocations. But therefore, the frequency-based approach also use the statistical tendency of a constituent word to co-occur in any specific lexical context of greater than chance probability. The second approach is phraseological approach. It uses semantic restrictiveness to distinguish collocations from other word combinations. Well, restrictiveness means to what extent the node word can be going with a limited number of collocating words. And also, this approach actually they place the collocation along with other word combinations on a continuum of idiomaticity. So you can see on the one end lies the free combinations, which means the node word, the verb can go with almost an infinite list of words that collocate with them. Okay, on the other hand, lies the idioms. For this one, you can see the node word, probably sweeten, it goes with a very limited number of collocating words. In the middle lies collocations. For this one, the node word take can go with a large number of collocating words that what Sweden can go with. But relatively speaking, we can take a limited, still the number is limited compared to what one can go with their collocating word. So this is basically what we call the phraseological approach to collocation. Okay, the last one is psycholinguistic approach. For this approach, it basically builds upon the assumption that formulaic language is a kind of linguistic unit that's stored and retrieved holistically from our mental lexicon. Okay. So despite interest of on this collocation and formulaic topics, we would like to see why collocation knowledge is important. This is because it has a very high frequency of occurrence in language use. And also, good mastery of collocational knowledge will improve non-native speakers' accuracy and idiomatic expressions of English. And this will also enhance their proficient processing fluency. And lastly, this has been found that collocation knowledge has been associated with L2 proficiency in general and also subcomponents of L2 language skills. Despite, well, we have to say, despite the interest and the surge of interest in formulaic language, in collocations, so on and so forth, there are still some issues regarding this topic. There hasn't yet to be a consensus as how to measure collocation knowledge. While theoretically, debate still persists as to how collocations are conceptualized. Are they conceptualized as one aspect of vocabulary knowledge, or they were treated as an independent construct? But based on our observation, we more likely to find that people tend to use sets of individual words only by replacing the individual words with collocations as the targets. However, as a mountain of evidence has indicated that collocation knowledge might be a totally different, if not totally different, it's kind of a different construct when compared to individual words. And also practically, there is to be a common practice in school-based language testing or any kind of testing framework. So this will limit the efficiency and also applicability of this collocation knowledge in the classroom learning setting. So, therefore, we think this is the rationale of the current study. We aim to systematically review the available collocation knowledge of measurements for assessing learners' receptive and also productive collocation knowledge. Here comes our method. We first try to conceptualize collocation knowledge under the four nations, the most established and accepted word knowledge framework. And we try to look at collocation knowledge from both receptive way and also productive way. For the receptive collocation knowledge, it means the ability to recognize collocation either in listening or in reading, while the productive collocation knowledge means the ability to produce accurate collocations in like speaking or writing. Based on the previous literature and on which we have tried to operationalize the key concepts in our systematic literature here. The first concept is collocation. So for our definition of collocation for this particular systematic review, we define it in a hybrid approach. We focus on 2 or 3 word combinations consisting lexical and grammatical collocations. For lexical collocations, it means it's composed of content words, while for grammatical collocations means the one content word plus a grammatical structure. And for any word combinations, 2 or 3 word combinations, that for either the phraseological classification or the frequency-based classification will be included for our review. Okay. The second big category of concept is measurement. We categorize measurement into either instrument or item format. For the instrument, it means specifically designed tool that can measure a construct through one or more items, or a type or subcomponent of the collocation, which means that could be verb non-collocations, adjective non-collocations, collocations occurring at a different frequency level from 1,000 most frequent up to 5 or above 1,000 frequency level. Okay. Most of the time, the instrument has been validated. For item format, it includes how questions or items or tasks appear within an instrument. Although there are some variations of the items, for instance, multiple choice, it still follows the basic structure. When you think of multiple choice, it definitely will have a term, destructors, and a key. So this is what we regard as an item format. Okay. For the phases of the systematic review, we follow the established practice suggested by Plonsky and Kim, and Plonsky and Oswald. For the inclusion criteria, we try to include empirical studies or literature reviews. We focus on measuring collocation knowledge, and the articles should have enough details for us to review about the measurements. And also, we're restricted to the L2 English teaching and learning, excluding other languages like German, French, so on and so forth. And the article was written in English. For the study selection, we set up the time of 1980 because this is the time when most of the major terms and approaches emerged to 2003. We acquired the databases of Eric Scopus and Web of Science, as we believe these are the major educational related databases. Okay. And for the keyword search, we include the 2 keywords and their variants, like collocation, phrasal verbs, formulaic language, multi-word units, so on and so forth, and also for measurement. We also include track, evaluate, develop, use, exam, access, so on and so forth. So the subject is limited to linguistics, education, and psychology. Here is the whole process. After the including of the duplicates and screening for inclusion and exclusion criteria, we ended up with reference of 153 articles to be reviewed. For these articles to be reviewed, we developed our own coding schema, which includes study identification, the year of the publication, the journal of the publication, measurement targets and the features like the collocation definition, what approach is being adopted to view the collocation in a particular article, and also instruments like the item formats, number of items, and how the items is scored. For the learners and the context, there are different L1 backgrounds and also the context of learning, ESL, EFL, so on and so forth. Also report the reliability of the instrument, if any. Yeah, we follow the coding procedure, which involves rounds of independent and also blind coding, which reached a very good encoder reliability number. Okay, here comes the major part, the results. We have identified altogether 16 different types of instruments, item formats, and also assessment tools. There are 6 instruments, 7 item formats, and 3 other assessment tools. We set them aside as these 3 other assessment tools are not exclusively measuring collocation knowledge, but also other types of rules knowledge. Okay. So now let's take a look at them one by one. The first one in the instrument category is word associates test, or in short form WAT. It measures receptive collocation knowledge and also adjunctive non-collocation is the targets. It's multiple choice format with 40 items. Here's the example, so you can take a look at the instruction. And for the word sudden is a stimulus. For the test takers, you are supposed to select 4 words from the following 2 boxes that you think are relevant to the stimulus word that is sudden. So you can see on the left side, left column, quick and surprising was selected as it indicates the denotational synonyms meaning of the sudden. A sudden could mean happening quickly and also surprisingly. Well, on the right side, you can see change and noise to be picked up, as this indicates a kind of connotational relationship between stimulus sudden and associates, sudden change and sudden noise. And for this version, you might notice that this is the older version. Later on, we have a different updated version. Okay, next one, collex. Collex measures receptive verb noun collocation composed of delexicalized verbs. The delexicalized verb here means the verb itself does not embed a lost meaning, but it has to go along with the collocating nouns to generate different types of meanings. Again, it's a multiple choice with 50 items. Here's the instruction, it's a little bit long, but in short, the test takers will take a look at the 3 options, and they are supposed to choose a real collocation by giving a tick in the box. For this one, it's obvious. Right? To run a business instead of drive a business or lead a business. Okay. Next one, co-match. It also measures receptive verb noun collocations of delexicalized verbs. It has 100 items, but in a different test format, that is yes or no items. Here is the instruction. For test takers, we will see on the test papers, it's a verb noun collocation and their yes and no choice. They're supposed to say whether this word is an accepted collocation or is a non-accepted collocation. They're giving a tick to each of them. So for this type, the test takers not only need to select the real collocations, but their ability to reject the non-collocations was also attested. Next one, the freeze test. It measures receptive collocation knowledge. It in the format of multiple choice and has 50 items. Well, the items for this test were generated from the phrasal expression list. It consists of 505 most frequent collocation or multi-word expressions from the 1,000 frequency up above to the 5,000 frequency. Here is the instruction. So you will see a phrase, and this phrase is given in a sentence. But however, you can see you probably won't get too much information from the sentence that will help you confirm the meaning of the phrase. Okay, the next one is frequency-based collocation test. It measures receptive collocation knowledge. It has 180 items in the format of multiple choice. Here is the instruction. On test papers, the test takers will see there is a note word. And also they have choices or options, which are collocating words that go with the noun. Here's a verb, noun, and also there is the adjective options that go with the noun as well. So for this test, it tests either verb noun collocations or adjective noun collocations. And also, you probably have noticed this 1,000, 2,000 frequency issue. Unlike the previous one, for the previous one, the whole collocations was placed at a different frequency level. But however, for this one, only the node word is placing from the different frequency word, or extracted from different frequency level. Okay, next one, I think this is the last one for the instrument part. It's a contrix. For this contrix one, it's a productive collocation knowledge. Up till now, this is the first one about productive collocational knowledge measurement. And some people might be saying that this could be semi-production because it still gives you some clues to the form of acceptable collocation. It has 45 items. It's in a 3+3 matching matrix. So you will see a sentence is given as a cue to provide you some contextual information and to restrict your answers, potential answers. And you are supposed to select the verb, the determiner, and the noun, and form acceptable collocation that fit in the context of the sentence. So this is what we call contrix. So next, we'll move on to talk about the 7 item formats. The first item format is multiple choice. You must have already seen a lot in the previous instruments. Well, it is also the most frequently used item format measuring receptive collocation knowledge based on our review. Items could be presented in either isolation, we just see an example of collax, to drive a business, to run a business, and to lead a business. No context being provided. It could also be presented in sentential context. For instance, this sentential context could be presented as either the stem or the sentential context could be presented as options. Some people are suggesting that for multiple choice, it's better to provide some contextual information as this better fits the nature of collocations. So collocations are naturally contextualized kind of word knowledge. And it is very hard for us to pick up what the meaning of the word, like for instance, cover, if we do not have any context information provided. So for this one, it should be you are covered by the insurance issued by the doctor's diagnosis. Okay, next one, acceptability judgment tasks. A little bit different from previous ones, but these will be conducted kind of online tasks. It measures receptive collocation knowledge, and this kind of online task will be able to measure the implicit knowledge, implicit collocation knowledge. As is often said by business people, vocabulary knowledge tends to be more explicit in nature. However, collocation knowledge is more likely to be implicit in nature. So the accuracy rate and the responsible time of a test takers when responding to an item to see whether this is an acceptable collocation or not will be recorded and for further analysis. So for here you can see the test takers, the target words, right, and letter will show on the screen of the computer. And the test takers will give test takers some time to decide whether this is an acceptable one or not by pressing the corresponding key on the computer as either yes or no. So the responses of the test takers, either their response or time, which means how much time does he need to give the response, and the accuracy rate means whether he has made the correct decision to judge is this an acceptable collocation or not, will be compared most of the time with native speakers. Next one is matching. Matching also asks learners to select no and collocate to form an acceptable collocation. It's a very typical example for contracts. You are supposed to match the verb, the word, determiner, and also the collocating down. So this is kind of match. We prefer to regard it as a kind of a productive collocation or knowledge measurement. Next one, fill in the blank. It is one of the most frequently used item formats for measuring productive collocation knowledge. Well, just like the multiple choice, it has many variations as well. For instance, here's an example. We have the know word, but no contextual information has been provided to the collocating word. It indicates that you could come up with a list of answers. Okay. The second one, a sentence is given. Unless you have some contextual information to restrict your possible responses to this item. And there's no need to change the form of the word to keep its original form. And there is another way that, again, the context information has been provided in sentence. So you have to form the spread rumors as a kind of collocation word. But however, you also need to consider accused of to change the form of the target word. There are other kinds of contextual information can be provided based on our research. For this one, you can see the L1 translation has been provided here. And also, the first letter of the word has been given to cue the responses of the target words. And another possibility presented in previous literature shows that, again, the explanation of the target words has been provided in L2, and also the number of letters has been given to restrict the possible responses by test takers. The fifth one, translation. Again, it measures productive collocation knowledge. The items could be presented in either L1 or L2. Well, here is an example. If L1 Chinese 满足需求 is being provided to cue the L2 responses, it measures, I think, the productive knowledge of form, meaning of collocation. It could be the other way around, that the L2 collocation being provided to cue the L1 responses to measure more like the receptive form, meaning collocation knowledge. Another example is given that the test takers will be asked to translate instead of discrete items, but sentences. However, it could be possible if you ask the learner to translate a sentence, they might be using the strategies of translation if they have difficulties to express some certain expressions and collocations. So therefore, the researchers actually give some kind of limitations so that will force the learners try to produce the collocation they target. For this one, they're giving L2 definition and also giving the first letter of the collocations. So in this way, it's more likely the test takers will produce the target collocations that could be used for further analysis by the researcher. Okay, the sixth one is sentence generation. For this one, of course, it measures the productive collocation knowledge. Here is a very classical example given by Schmidt, 1999, that he conducted a one-on-one interview, invited test takers to come up with 3 sentences of the target words under the 3 semantical fields or topics. Massive relates with war, massive relates with finance or economy, and massive relates with change, based on which the researchers come up with a pool of answers. Therefore, when they finish making up the sentences, the researchers can check what are the possible collocations the learners have produced while they are making the sentence. The last one for the item format is error correction. Again, it measures productive collocation knowledge. And here is a sample. For this example, the test takers are supposed to make a decision whether this sentence written appropriately or inappropriately, and make corrections if necessary. So for this sentence, you might have noticed that this is the incorrect one. If you want to say something like, you have to face the consequences by your action, you should say, pay the piper, instead of stay the piper. Okay, now we move on to the other 3 types of collocational knowledge measurement tools. As these will produce a rich data that could be used to analyze other abilities of our learners. The first one is eye tracking. Eye tracking measures receptive collocation knowledge, and also it's an online task that can be used. Well, it's slightly different from what we just said, the phrasal acceptability judgment task. This eye tracking task won't ask our test takers to perform some extra activities. They only need to do is sit and read. Therefore, it has a higher level of ecological validity. And learners, while they're reading, learners' eye movements will be recorded, and also their fixation about the words will also be recorded for further analysis. The task depends on what you want the learners to read and depends on your research purposes. When their eye movements are recorded, they will be used for analyze according to these different indices, like fixation, gaze, reading time, regression, so on and so forth. But there's a lot of indices to choose from. Most of the time, it depends on the research question to decide which indices you should choose from. And also, according to some scholars like Collocational 2020, actually they are suggesting that instead of not only about the research questions, we also need to consider the size of the area of the interest of area. For instance, the first fixation duration, this index, is probably more suitable, according to him, that for single word duration, single word eye movement analysis. It is not that reliable when your interest of area actually has many more words as a large word span, because this will likely to increase the possibility of the fixation increase. Okay, the second one for this type is writing task. Writing task this kind of writing task, unlike the sentence generation, is more likely to produce more contextualized and spontaneous collocation use for further analysis. But usually we're following steps to come up with the writing task analysis of collocations. We come up to compiling corpus of our learners' writing tasks. We could resort to a large scale corpora, can also build up our own corpora. although the large-scale corpora has a better representativeness, however, if we can build our own corpora, we can better control the tasks. Followed by to extract the collocations from the students' writing tasks. So this will depend on what kind of approach you will use, phraseological approach, frequency-based approach. And more often, based on our review of the literature, we feel researchers tend to use frequency-based research, to use frequency as a threshold, and also mutual information as a kind of association index to select the targeted collocations from the writing task. And then we move on to the collocation analysis when they have been successfully extracted. We analyze the errors of the collocation made by the non-native speakers, the number of collocations used in their writing. The collocation frequency here is different from number of collocations. Collocation frequency means the frequency of occurrence of the collocations from the reference corpora, most of the time it's native speaker corpora. And collocation types and ratios, like verb noun, adjective noun, so on and so forth, and also collocation diversity. The list is more than that. The last one is speaking task. For the speaking task, again, it measures productive, spontaneous, contextualized collocation use. And we follow the steps as well, starting with compiling a corpora, extracting collocations from corpus, and also conducting collocation analysis. I feel basically the indices are same with the writing task. The only difference we notice that is because the speaking task have some on-time production, we have some oral data. So therefore, is it possibly a good way for us to test whether collocations are stored and retrieved holistically in our meta lexicon? Therefore, when people are analyzing the collocations of the speaking task, there are sometimes we'll consider the citation-free strings to see if there is a very limited or small number of hesitations time between the two words being produced as a collocation. They are more likely to treat that learners have already stored them in their mental lexicon. Okay, so that's basically the introduction of each of the instrument and item format. And now it's a very quick summary for the items we have. So you can see we have 6 instruments and 7 item formats and 3 other assessment tools. So R, it represents receptive, and P represents productive. Well, based on this kind of table, probably you will see that it's still a wide range of collocational knowledge assessment tools that are available for our researchers and teachers to be utilized in the classroom and also research. And also you might be noticing that for the instruments part, the majority of them are assessing receptive collocational knowledge, only with one assessing productive. And these are some people are arguing it could be semi-productive. But could be a good news. There should be some new one to be soon published. As our team is reviewing a kind of article, they are developing a productive collocational instrument. Okay, for the item formats, you probably would have noticed that the majority of them have focused on productive aspects of collocational knowledge. And also there's limited choices for us to measure collocational knowledge online, which means that the implicit aspect of collocational knowledge has received relatively little attention and availability. Okay. Any lessons that we can take for our teachers and also researchers? For teachers, we actually encourage them to utilize robust and productive, practical or classroom-friendly assessment tools to enhance their teaching and learning. Because we believe that these probably foster a positive washback effect that will help their instruction and also learning. And also, as there are quite a number of tools, item formats available to our teachers, the teachers should also stay vigilant to see what are the respective strengths and probably limitations of each of these item format and instrument that might be useful to their classroom learning and teaching context. Okay. For researchers, we're encouraging future researchers to clarify constructs of collocations when they're starting to measure learners' collocation knowledge. Because during our review of the articles, we have noticed that not all of them have given a very clear operationalizing definition of this collocation knowledge. And also, we want to improve the transparency in instrument development to see how the type of words was selected, how the item format was developed, whether they have been validated, to what and to what extent. Okay, and we also encourage our future researchers to promote a comprehensive and multifaceted research approach. For instance, we are encouraging them to use multimodality to test the test takers' collocations through like listening tasks. And we also want to expand the target participants. Like from our research, we have noticed that the majority of the study have focused on intermediate to advanced learners, with relative attention has been given to younger ages. So the age span should also be noted for future research. Okay, so I think that's so much for presentation of the study we have conducted. And if you want to have further information, detailed information about those instruments and the item formats, you can refer to this article that has been published. For this one, it's an 8,000 words article. We also provided supplementary materials which consists of over 5,000. So these words have been distributed to describe like the strengths, the weaknesses, and details of these instruments and item formats. Okay, and also if you have any further questions regarding the instruments, the study, the paper, or the project, just as Professor Reynolds has introduced early on, you can also contact me through this email. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so we still have 15 minutes for Q&A. So I think we have a small group, so maybe we don't need a microphone. So who would like to offer up the first question? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Students first.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Ding and Chen, for your excellent presentation. I feel like I already read this paper, and it's I think the way you explain it is much more simple and easy to understand. So thank you for coming here and doing this presentation. So for my question in particular, I'm interested in these assessment methods. So you talk about eye tracking as a way of assessing collocational knowledge. I'm wondering if you know about any other online data methods, for example, EEG or FNRS, that have been used also to assess collocational knowledge?
Thank you, Ivo, for your very good question. I think that's a very good way to go to use other untraditional, unconventional way to explore their implicit collocational knowledge. EEG could also be a way, but for the current research we have conducted, we limited that to the educational context, and most of the time we limited them to the L1, L2 English collocations. So I have to say, for this study, we haven't found anyone that touched upon the collocational knowledge using EEG, but I definitely believe this should be a way to go, and we would like to see future research on this one. Thank you.
I haven't read the paper, so forgive me if this is answered elsewhere, but are you presupposing teachers are not only teaching collocation, frontline teachers are teaching collocation on a regular basis, but they're doing so in a structured way informed by frequency data? So is this testing regimen linking back to a structured teaching program, or is this testing regimen for any English teachers anywhere in anything?
Thank you for your question. I can feel that you must have a very profound teaching experience to come up with such a question.
I don't understand the purpose of the research.
Well, I have to say, for this current research, we haven't found any particular associations between the structured way of teaching research from this research. But we are believing that, and this is also our motivation to conduct such a research, to sort out all those kind of hostile collocational measurement ways and provide those things to the teachers, ELC teachers, so on and so forth, so that they can utilize on appropriate circumstances of their teaching.
So collocation assessment will have a backwash effect on all teaching.
Yeah, we hope so. We hope so that in the future it has a positive washback effect. Thank you.
Other questions?
I'm not a specialist in vocabulary, but I'm very interested in how you measure, measurements and assessment parts. My question is quite intuitive, actually. I feel, collocation, although it is, I think it is in a conjunction between semantics and syntax, because it has that grammar aspect. You have the noun and verb collocation. But I feel vocabulary in general, it has a lot to do with the semantic field. So what is the topic it is about? And in schools, especially in the English and foreign language or second language instances where students learn vocabulary primarily from school, they are learning vocabulary topic by topic. Okay, so usually they were all vegetables, sports, they were introduced to vocabulary topic by topic. Hence my intuition is collocation may be affected by how, the topics students have been exposed to. So I don't know what you think about it. Well, from none of these instruments you have introduced so far, they don't seem to consider semantic fields, but mostly statistics like frequency or phrasal structure. They don't seem to have considered semantic field. That's probably my question. I couldn't articulate it very well. But my intuition is, have you encountered any of these measurement tools that has ever considered, the topics of semantic field?
Thank you for your question. I think you have brought up a very good and key point of vocabulary learning. And the most important part of vocabulary learning, probably for school-based context, is the form and meaning connections. And that also has implications for the collocation, which should also feel like a context-driven. However, I have to say, we didn't have noticed any kind of collocational measurements that are on the different specific topics. But we have read some of the articles. They try to implement certain topic-based teaching procedure, teaching approach, and then they assess their learners' collocational knowledge. And the way to assess it are just presented as this kind of item format. So they use this item format to generalize their own tests, the classroom-based test, to test the topic-related collocations. So it's more personalized and classroom-based. And also for the frequency issue, why I guess there's only frequency-based collocation list or tests, because for those collocation lists are frequent ones that are most meaningful and practical for teaching and learning.
And so I think I want to build on what she said, I think the same thing. I think those item formats are more specific, and those studies are more specific. So those first ones, they're like assessments. So those, I think they don't consider at all, because they're trying to figure out some kind of construct. What is collocation competence? And it's got something, they don't really know what they're measuring, so they won't consider what's people have learned or the background of the participants that much, although they do think about like L1 influence. I think that's probably the only thing that they will consider. But they don't really consider much about other influences. But those item formats, where all those came from was all the individual studies. Like maybe people did classroom-based studies, and then they need to have some way to assess. So they came up with different ways of assessing. Those are very contextualized. But for the concept or the construct of productive collocation knowledge, whatever that is, or receptive collocation knowledge, they don't consider very much. This is a good critical point. Yeah. I think some researchers in vocabulary are starting to consider like this kind of thing, because they're starting to think about, for example, they went about it by L1. Like they did these, like they measured like thousands of people in L1 Chinese speakers, L1 German, L1 French, and different kinds of things, in hopes of trying to get a large big data set to say, oh, because the curriculum in those different countries may affect which words they know. The first language may affect the ability for them to travel outside their own country, or how much they use English with other people. They tried to do it in this way, and they found the words that different people from different countries know is vastly different. That's a very interesting study.
Yeah, because I noticed you actually use the collocation knowledge and collocation competence interchangeably.
Yeah.
But for me, it's actually quite different.
Yeah.
If it's knowledge, then you have to consider the scope of the knowledge and how you sample from the knowledge. Because knowledge associated with curriculum is more kind of fixed.
Right.
Competence is more psychological construct.
Right.
It is more abstract, and it's depending on the theoretical framework you use to define competence. Of course, it's also subject to sampling method.
Right.
Yes, and has to do with,
Yeah, so it was very hard for us to do this review, because we were trying to be very comprehensive. Like if we just focus on the construct of qualification competence, the paper would be too small, because there's nothing there, just a few instruments. And then we don't have much to say to teachers, because teachers don't care too much about like competence. They are caring about, are students learning the things that I'm teaching or the materials they're working with in my classroom? The curriculum. They're more, so that's why actually we kind of have some criticism from the reviewers, but we said we have to keep the second part, because our purpose, one of the driving purposes was to summarize all of this for teachers, so they can go in and look at all of the material. There's a very nice table, then they can easily choose a format, and they can plug in their teaching materials into the format. At least there's good explanation there. We hope that some teachers may use it. Maybe nobody will use it, but that was our hope still.
So, but as teachers seldom read this kind of article. I mean, perhaps teachers won't become the primary reader of the article.
No, the teachers don't become the primary reader of any of our articles. But we write about them in the implications as if, and it will. But there's other ways, that we can use the information to.
Sure. Yeah. That's joking. I feel, it's also perhaps more meaningful for researchers.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Carino's clarification, and thank you for your question. And actually, you have also written about a very key concept, that collocation competence.
Yeah.
So we're also involving in a project focusing on measuring different L1s EFL learners' collocational competence. So if you are interested, so please stay tuned with our progression.
Let's see. I think we have time for another question. One more question.
I have a question about methodology. Why do you use systematic literature review and not use other methodology like meta-analysis and etc.?
That's a good question. Because this is the first study of this attempt, so we want to first explore what do we have. We want to figure out what are those instruments available over there that we can use. And probably in the second stage, we can move on to do what you said, like meta-analysis. And another important reason that we didn't use meta-analysis is because we didn't find enough information that support to use meta-analysis to do the statistic analysis of the data, because they are not providing enough details. Just as we suggest that future studies could provide a more comprehensive description of the item development, statistics, so on and so forth. That will help the future researchers to perform this meta-analysis. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I wanted to know whether you have counted, because you have reviewed 153 articles and you only identified the 7 item formats. I would like to know how, in terms of frequency, which format is the most frequently used. Do you have that information in your article?
We didn't have numbers to show which one has the largest percentage of occurrence in these papers, but we have stated clearly that multiple choice and fill in the blanks are actually the 2 most frequently used item formats. One is to measure receptive collocation knowledge, and the other measuring productive collocation knowledge.
Okay, so you didn't count the other formats, the frequency of other format.
I think we could though, because in the extra data that we put up there, we have an Excel file that's available to download that has each study with all of the information. You'll find nobody validated their instruments in any of this. Did we find any? Only in those that use only those instruments, but not item formats. If it's just somebody they conducted a study and they measured collocation knowledge in their study, they very seldom did they. There's a few they give they computed a Cronbach alpha. But most of the time they don't do anything. Nothing. Yeah, maybe that's it. Any other thing? Do you remember any others? And very few, right?
Yeah, very few.
Yeah. But we have all of that data available in the Excel file. I think we provided that, right? Yeah, it's there. Yeah.
It's downloadable.
Yeah, you can download all of that. But that's why we said a lot of people didn't.
It's a niche area.
But there's a lot of people working on collocation research, actually, a lot. So I think it's about the field. Maybe they didn't require it, but also it's about vocabulary knowledge. Maybe it's very hard, especially if the study is measuring incidental learning. Maybe people don't pay attention to those things. And so many individual differences between each participant. You need to do mixed effects models. And then it will take care of all that. But I don't think many of those studies were doing complicated, intricate statistics. They're doing very simple kinds of things. But lots of work for the future students to do. It's always good to be the first ones to do anything, because nobody is going to criticize you because you're the first one. But now there's lots of areas to criticize. Yeah. Okay, I think that comes to the end of our talk. So thank you all for joining us. If you haven't signed the sheet, could you please help us to sign the sheet, because this is for the general office to know how many people have joined today. And thank you again, Professor Ding, for